one of the things that I'm super interested in diving into, you know, your work at Every Table, your experience in a variety of different communities, and also your experience in entrepreneurship, it gives you a unique viewpoint, I think, of the financial need, right? And ability to fund entrepreneurial ventures. And I know one of the things you talk about quite a bit is the pitfalls of traditional banks and how sort of different ways to go about funding, if you will, in a way that has social impact. And I'll share this too. The majority of our listeners are women, women of color, and many of them come from not affluent backgrounds, right?
Yeah,
And they're the entrepreneurs who are in what we call the good food space, right? They're trying to do things like bring good ingredients to people's tables, right? We're trying to get their products into more grocery stores
yeah,
or farmers markets or whatever their vision is. And a big part of it too is to get representation of their culture into the community, right? And more widely available. So I think that this topic of alternative sources of funding and different ways to think about this is so crucially important. I'm just
yeah,
like really excited to learn from you here.
yeah. And kudos for you with what you're doing. And I learned really early that women rule the world, right? So, hey, all the women around me were leaders and trailblazers. Like my aunt Bessie was like one of the first foreman supervisors at Ford Motor Company. So,
Wow.
so all I saw was women that were running not only households but running businesses outside. So I never had that. What would it call like obstacle in my mind that
Yeah.
women aren't trailblazers. I mean, so one of the things that I learned at Every Table is, and the reason why I was like telling you like part of my role, and then the last part of my role was a big part of raising capital, is that raising money is hard, period, right? Maybe a little bit easier for some. Obviously, we know that some people
Yeah.
have more resources and network, but just the act of trying to get capital and the act of getting capital within the food and retail space is difficult because of the margins. And traditional banks don't really love food and retail because of that,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're already established. So that's an extremely difficult and arduous process to even get anything from a bank. And then you top that on with, like you said, you're trying to change the food system and provide good food,
Yeah.
healthier food. That's a whole nother challenge, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I learned is that being out on the road and learning about philanthropic dollars and impact investing dollars, just all these different people that are out in the space that are working towards some of the goals that you are and your audience is that it's out there, and a lot of it may have to come from and has to come from the foundation and philanthropic world, like, and it could be a combination of that. So that's what we were able to do successfully at Every Table, is really tap into that. And I will tell you, and I will tell your audience, not to say it at the very least at all that it's easy.
Right.
So I tell people that you have to be disciplined, and you also have to be committed, and you also have to understand and not care about people telling you no, because most of the time that's what you're going to get. So, for example, how does that play out? It was one point in time when we were full force into fundraising, or that I was researching every day, trying to get at least 10 to 20 people in the pipeline that may be interested, then reaching out to those 10 to 20 on a consistent basis. And then from those 10 to 20, you may get two or three that are interested. And then you start to pitch to those two or three, and then trying to get money from those two or three. So there's a whole cycle time that it takes.
Yeah.
But you have to be disciplined, you have to be committed, and you have to understand that most of what you're going to get is no. So there's that money out there, but then there's also what you talked about is in the notes and the research is a community development financial institution enacted in the 90s, that the banking industry has systemically left out a lot of people, particularly Black people, over throughout the years, and been in racist practices. And so CDFIs were brought in to fulfill that gap in understanding and investing in underserved neighborhoods and low to moderate neighborhoods, but also small businesses. And their underwriting process is a lot more lenient than traditional banks because their purpose is to invest in Black and brown entrepreneurs within these communities that are trying to open businesses. So they understand that somebody may not have hundreds and thousands of money in the bank. Every CDFI has their different underwriting process, but their process is a lot more culturally competent. And so there's thousands of them out there. So me traveling and going to conferences, I found out, about an organization, for example, that rates all the CDFIs throughout the country. And then they have a platform where you can go on and you could put in agriculture, and then it would tell you which CDFIs invest in agriculture, women economics. It'll tell you that. So this is and I want to highlight this too. This is the importance. There's a gap in information that still exists too. So this is also the role that my new company plays as well, because I started to notice that, or I knew that, but I started to be even more pronounced, throughout the last years. And I wanted to be that conduit and that resource to help folks be able to get it, because I know that being an entrepreneur in a startup is extremely difficult, and you can have a great idea and you can also be bringing in revenue, but a lot of folks run out of money.
Yeah.
Right. I think I was reading a couple of years ago, like how Uber was in the red for years. Like it's like a lot of these companies, but they got revenue coming in, and they're also able to get cash to help them maintain.
Yeah.
So my fight and my love is always with the underdog and the underrepresented and that entrepreneurial audience. So, those are some of the things that, I want to share, but definitely want to highlight the fact that if you think it's easy and you get defeated easily, then you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
For me, when I started my catering company, I went to family and friends. So I was blessed. My father was able to give me a small amount of money, which was big for him and big for me. But pretty quickly, I went through that money. And so I understood, I actually tried to and met with a lot of banks back then, not really understanding and knowing about CDFIs. And all of them said no.
Yeah.
And I understood that was probably going to be the answer, but I still moved forward. So you have to be unique in the way in which you look at funding your business. And then there are people out here that are funding good food businesses, right? There are. So those are some of the people that I met when I was at conferences as well, that want to fund, that care about food. There's not enough out there that I would like to see. There's a lot of folks who are investing in, for example, the just eggs and the plant-based meats and things of that nature, but there aren't a lot of folks that are investing in just the, mom and pop good food ideas that we need to change the food system.
Can you share the website where people can go to do that CDFI research?
Yeah.
I think that's such a valuable.
It's spelled AERIS, AERIS, Insights, INSIGHT. So AERIS Insights.
Can we dig into that a little bit more? When you work with the CDFI, is there more requirements to get approved, less? Can you talk a little bit about the process at all, or maybe what people might expect?
Yeah, it's a variation, Sarah. It depends on a lot of CDFIs, they put together their own underwriting process. So it runs the gamut. Like you can have some that I find that are similar. I'm like, oh, well, it's not even, a big difference between you and a bank, right? You want collateral, you want the high credit score, you want all this, but then there's some who say, you know what, we don't need any collateral. It just depends on their standards and also where they're getting their money from. Most of them get their money from, they get them from the Treasury, they get it from foundations, they can get it from individuals. So they typically set their own underwriting criteria, but then like you can have some that are, a lot lenient, or they may say, you know what, because of our leniency, we're only going to loan, up to $100,000. Like we're doing those type of loans. And then there's some that do just micro loans.
Right.
Like I know an individual, Inclusive Action, who's an amazing, Rudy, who runs that. They do micro loans for street food vendors. Right, small loans. You're talking about maybe $5,000 to $10,000 or even less.
Right.
Because for a lot of folks, street vending is a pathway to economic mobility and creative creations of business. And so he, understood that community. And so he works with banks and other folks to get money. And then that's how he lends. So it just runs the gamut. So you just have to, people have to do their research, but they need businesses as well. That's what they, a lot of them are out. They don't necessarily know what's going on in each community or the community, even sometimes the communities that they serve. So this is why people, like I said, you really have to be consistent and persistent and do your research and make sure you stay on it, and then just go out and call and learn, and be curious and hear a lot of no's until you get the yes that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask one more question about the philanthropic strategies. As you pointed out, every table is a for-profit organization, but philanthropic funding was received and utilized to further, that the franchising program or to establish it and whatnot. I don't think most people realize that if you are for profit, you can also work with philanthropic organizations. Can you speak to that a little bit, and how
Yeah.
someone might think about, like, who do I approach, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, I didn't know that until I started to work with Every Table. There is a vehicle that foundations, most, not all of them, but a lot of them have at their disposal, called PRI, which stands for Program Related Investment.
Mm.
If your audience goes to YouTube, there's a great short video. It's only 2 minutes that the Ford Foundation does on PRIs and also MRIs, which is mission related investments. So those are vehicles that they have at their disposal to make investments with through their endowment, right? And PRI is exactly that. It's a program related investment, meaning that a foundation can invest in a for-profit that meets, it's an alignment with what they want to do, mission wise, that foundation. So for example, a foundation may say, hey, we really want to solve the affordable housing crisis, which is a lot where PRI money goes to. They can make an investment in somebody who's doing that and then hope to get some returns, as opposed to a grant, where a grant is a complete write-off, right? So they can hope to get a return, or their focus is to get a return. But tax code wise, it can't be over a certain amount. I don't know the specific amount. And that loan, they can be 0% interest, or as high, I don't think the highest they can go is 2%. So it's really cheap capital.
Wow.
What you have to prove, reason why you have to prove, is that you have to have a pro forma, or the month, say estimates to say, here's how we're going to pay that back.
Yeah.
As the company that's getting it, right?
Yeah.
So that's why Every Table was able to tap into it. We have obviously retail stores and other stores. And so we created, our financial team created a model that said, here, from this money, this is how we will pay that back. The terms can be 7 to 10 years. So it's flexible in that regard as well. And so that's something, like you said, I didn't know about until I came to Every Table. And so we were able to tap into that. We started looking at foundations who cared about, who were trying to solve healthy food access, that were trying to solve economic opportunities and racial wealth, in the racial wealth gap for women and people of color. And really do your research on that. And then we started to reach out to those. We put together pitch decks that fit that audience. We put together one sheets. We did all kinds of stuff. Like, this is the thing that I was saying, like, to your audience earlier, like we really spent, in discipline on spending time, and most of what we got, like, if was, like I said, no's, but those couple of yeses led to other yeses. And then the philanthropic world looks at it, and the way they identify it is also as catalytic capital, meaning that when you are able to receive, they want to make those investments in those big ideas around the food system, good food, because they understand that if they are investing it, that can draw other investors in it. So they're really giving you that capital to prove out the model, to say that they're invested in it, and then hopefully you bring other folks. And I saw how that played out too. Like, once people, some of the bigger foundations, the name foundations, every world is small, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once they started to find out that, oh, such and such invested in that, that helped it, that, that fear, or that validation that someone else did it. So maybe we should make an investment as well.
Yeah.
So that's how that played out also.
I had no idea that this existed. I'm so glad that you're sharing this, because I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about just the clients I work with one-on-one, not
Yes.
even the broader community, that, you know, they're creating a good food product. They're hiring people from a certain community, like a community, I want to word this right. They're hiring people of all abilities,
Yes.
right? And that is such a mission driven way to hire, but it comes with its limitations,
Yeah.
right? And it comes with its own struggles when you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to compete in a food industry, for example, where efficiency and driving down cost so that you can drive up margin, right? Those things, they sort of butt up
It's the
against one
tension.
another.
There's always
Yeah.
that tension. Yeah.
And so this the idea that there may be funding out there from a missions aligned organization, right, or a philanthropic organization who's also fighting for people of all abilities to have meaningful work and to get paid for it, right, so that they can live independently or have the money to, you know, to live a good life. I mean, that just is such an awesome possibility, and that's just one that kind of is on top of my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy to share it. A big part of, like you said, what you and I do is, making sharing information and lessening that information and that financial gap. Like that's just which I love to do. And I always tell folks, so many people have done it for me. Like, hey, that's what I should be doing. But there's a lot of stuff out there. Just like when you're running a business, like you guys, like we talked about earlier, you got so many things that are on your plate and in your head, and there's only so much time in the day that you don't even necessarily have time to research. And so that's the
Yeah.
value that you bring, the value that I bring to clients as well. Like, hey, we can be that thought partner. We can be the ones that's doing the research and making the connections for you, because you're tasked with running that business day to day and all the things that come with that. But definitely, like podcasts and information, the beauty of the digital age, the internet, is one of the beauties is that the information is out there,
Yeah.
and it's accessible, but then you have to find it, and then you have to read it, research it. So, but yeah, they're out there. There are people that want to, make the food system a better system. We understand that change takes a long time. So, and they understand that too. So they're making investments that are long-term, sustainable, and saying that, hey, we may not see the fruits of that while we're here, but we're still going to push against it and work towards changing that and
Yeah.
making a more inclusive and equitable space for everybody.
Absolutely.